to Guzzlers, we're going to do some baking. Now, we're going to make some cakes, but these are a special sort of cake. They're a French cake, if you like, although some people think of them as cookies or biscuits, but they're not. They are actually cakes. And I'm taking the recipe from this book here, Voila. I think the wife bought me this because she'd said about getting it, some of the really nice recipes, and I haven't tried any yet, so this is the first one, although there's lots in here I'm going to do. It's alright, cupcake Gemma, I'm still using yours. But the interesting thing with this is all obviously French baking and French, patisserie, and I think there's some bread in there as well. And interestingly, I went to a local French restaurant, sort of cafe restaurant, the other week, and for dessert they had a whole range of patisseries. And I'm flicking through that book again, I'm thinking, oh, there's that one, oh, there's that one. So I'm going to have to make some other things from there. But anyway, we're going to make Madeleines. These are French Madeleines. There are British Madeleines, but they're completely different. These are your classic French Madeleine. So the Madeleines are made, the only thing that's different is the fact that you need this sort of special Madeleine mould. They have this shell shape. We're not going to need that just yet, because it's important that you rest the batter, if you like, for at least an hour in the fridge, or preferably overnight. Well, we're not going to do it overnight, we're going to rest it for an hour or so. And it's a simple sponge mixture. Okay, some recipes they add almond, ground almond, but we're just making a simple one with lemon zest. So they're going to be lemon Madeleines. So in here I've got 200 grams of caster sugar, and then I'm just going to add, oh, that broke nicely, didn't it? Not. 3 large eggs, and we're just going to whisk that together. Now you could do it in a stand mixer if you want, but not. So the Madeleine, like I say, is a traditional French cake. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, about the history of it. But what we're just going to do now is just whisk this together. I've got in the saucepan there some, as it happens, I only buy unsalted butter, and you want salted butter in this case. So I'm going to add a pinch of salt to the batter at one point. But you need it melted to blend it in with this. I've got 125 grams of that, and I've just warmed that up and melted that down. Then you're going to want plain flour, 250 grams of plain flour, 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and 50 mils of milk, whole milk. And then obviously, because we're going to flavour this with lemon, you want a lemon, or you want the zest from one lemon. So I'm just going to make sure that's all nicely mixed together, and we'll start adding the rest, and I'll start telling you a bit about the Madeleine. So I've got that whisked together, and so now, like I said, I want 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. Okay. 1.5. Now, I said to you we need to rest this batter once we've mixed it all up. It's important we do that, else they won't rise. And like I say, these are like little mini sponge cakes. Unfortunately, my big sieve I had to use yesterday, and it's still a bit dirty and a bit wet, so I'm having to make do with this little one. So I'm just going to sift this flour in. Now, I said to you how we traditionally use this tray. There's quite a few stories about where the Madeleines come from, but what is known, it is a traditional French from northeast France, the Lorraine region, and there are 2 specific communities there where it sort of originated from. But the general consensus is it's called a Madeleine because it was named after its inventor, a woman called Madeleine. But there are variations on quite who it was. The general consensus is that she was a cook, if you like, for quite a wealthy patron. Quite who this wealthy patron is subject to debate. One story is that it was a chap, this is during the 18th century, a chap, Stanislaus I, who was the Duke of Lorraine, and actually, as it happened, he was the exiled King of Poland. And he had, so we're just mixing this all together now. He had a castle, and he was the son-in-law, or rather Louis XV was the son-in-law of Stanislaus, and so obviously he would visit, and on one of his occasions he saw these mini little cakes baked by Madeleine Paulmier, I think it was, and he was very taken with these cakes, so much so he said, I'm going to name them after you. These are Madeleines. His wife Maria, the king, Louis XV's wife Maria, she took to them as well, and she took them off back to the French court and said, look at these wonderful things. Well, of course, that was what then spurred the whole of France to take up these Madeleines, because this is what royalty ate. And so that's one story about how it became a Madeleine. Now, I said to you I'm just going to add a little pinch of salt, simply because I'm not using salted butter, which is unusual really, because most recipes cook with, so more, they all say add unsalted butter. I'll have to have a look actually. I don't know whether perhaps that's a French thing, perhaps they just do use salted butter. So, what other stories were there? Another one was that her patron was this rather eccentric rebel known as, well actually he was a cardinal, Paul de Gondi, and he had a castle in Lorraine region, specifically in Commerce, which is one of the regions attributed to the invention of the Madeleine. Right, so I think we're now ready to move to the next stage. This is where we're now going to whisk in that melted butter. I think I said to you 125 grams of that. And we want to make sure this is all thoroughly mixed in. And then all we've got left to add is our milk and our lemon zest. Now, like I said, you don't actually have to flavour them with lemon. You could have them plain, you could have them with vanilla. Some people dip them in chocolate, and I think in her book she makes it, though it says she's making them 4 different ways. One is that I'm not quite sure, because she says fill the centre with Nutella, and it's like using a piping bag, and I'm not sure how she means do that. I presume she means after they're cooked, but anyway, we're just going to make some nice plain lemon ones. So I want to make sure that butter's all in there. Another story is that actually these cakes didn't originate in France, but the person, Madeleine, who either brought the recipe back to France and therefore it became attributed to France, or it was actually sold by someone called Madeleine in Spain, where they'd gone for pilgrimage. So like I say, there's various stories as to how, you know, these came about. Right, so that's that in there. So now what we do next is we just take our milk and we whisk that in. Got that mixed in, and so now I'm just going to take 1 lemon and zest it. Now the first sort of record, if you like, of Madeleines dates back to the 18th century, and well, I'm talking about in France. This is 18th century, and in 1758, a French Jacobite, what was his name? Oh, actually, I don't know his name. He was a Jacobite refugee in France, and he said he was, or it's written that he said to prepare cakes a la Madeleine and other small desserts. So he didn't necessarily say what the Madeleine was, but that's, you know, the term was used, if you like. But it's also, the Madeleine seems to have occurred at the same time as there was this increase in use of moulds to shape product, if you like. And so, I think I've just about got most of that on there. Ooh, a little bit there. And it sort of, that was about the 1760s when people started using moulds, and then it sort of spread from there. Get rid of that, right the end, and mix that in. Now, we're now finished, as it were. So I'm just going to make sure that's mixed in, and then we're going to cover that over, and that's going to rest for an hour at least in the fridge. Like I say, you can do it overnight. And she does make sure, she points out that it is vitally important that you do give it a chance to rest, otherwise cakes don't rise. Okay, so not much else to tell you about Madeleines, but I might save that. And what I'm going to do now, like I say, we're now covering that and resting. So here we are several hours later, partly, oops, get that on, that'll help, partly because I suddenly discovered when I turned the oven on to preheat it, after about an hour and a half of letting this thing chill, all the power had gone off, and I think the oven's blown up. So it is sort of working, but I'm having to do a bit of a fiddle. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But here is a Madeleine tray, and what I've done is I've greased it with butter and then given it a sprinkle of flour. Now, I'm using a piping bag simply because obviously these are quite small, and we want to about 3/4 fill these moulds, if you like, which is a bit difficult because this batter's quite thick. I think I might have overfilled the first couple. And then we're going to bake it initially for 6 minutes at 220. After 6 minutes, and this is fan, after 6 minutes we reduce it down to 200, and we'll be cooking it for another, well, if you're doing mini ones it's another 2 minutes. If you're doing bigger ones it's another 4 minutes. I suspect these are classed as mini, given I've got all that batter left. So I'm going to put that where I don't feel like a bloody mess everywhere. So in the oven, 6 minutes, temperature down, extra couple of minutes till they're done. And then when we take them out, we let them cool in the tin. That's the Madeleines. That's my recipe. They come out a bit darker. I don't know whether it's the metal, I think it's stainless mould. and it's retaining a lot of the heat, I think, because the bottoms weren't. Although I did, particularly in the first batch, before I managed to readjust temperature, they did bulge out an awful lot on the bottom, and so some of them did actually have to do a little bit of trim. So Madeleines, I keep wanting to call them Madeleine because that's how it's spelled. Madeleines essentially took off during the 1760s, and they believe part of the reason for that was because they used to sell them on Commercy rail station, and so of course it's spread out all over the place, and it's highly likely they exported them down to Paris. By the end of the 19th century, Madeleines were considered like the diet, if you like, for the French bourgeoisie. So anyway, let's try one. This one was one of the first batches. It's a little bit dark around the edges, so I'll link this one. Only really a little hint of lemon. I think in hindsight it might be better with a bit more, if you actually want lemon ones, that is. A little bit like a basic plain cupcake in texture, but you've got this sort of crust on the outside. Really, these weren't eaten straight away. Can I better make some coffee? But there you go, very, very nice. Well, I'm just going to try one. Reserve it at the bloody door. Pain chip. Wait till I'm back, do something. I've given them a light dusting with icing sugar. You don't necessarily normally do that. It's just the fact that I thought it might help improve them, especially the little darker ones. But there you go. From Manon's Voila cookbook, French Madeleines.